So this begins our interview for gender roles in society. I'm interviewing Paige Macy, who's my mother. She's 43 years old. We're going to start out with our first questions. Are you ready, Paige?
Yes.
Make sure you speak up. So, why are there generally so few women in top positions, in your opinion?
I think they have to work harder, be more efficient, and exhibit more tenacity to get there.
Okay. So, does one gender take more time off from work than another in that case?
I would assume possible, possibly.
Okay.
I
Do you,
simply can't say for certain.
okay. Do you know what a glass ceiling is?
I am aware.
Okay. So, in your time working, which has been how long would you say you've
I've
been
been in the
employed?
workforce for approximately 24 years.
Okay, so in your experience, have you ever had that happen to you where you've experienced a glass ceiling?
Not so much. Probably due to the fact that I've never really climbed the corporate ladder. Out of the 24 years I've been in the workforce, I've been self employed for 13 of them. So it's a completely different atmosphere. I establish the culture in my businesses. However, in corporate America, that's simply not the case.
Okay. So this is in regards to how you were raised and the atmosphere and environment where you were brought up. So were you raised or were you and your siblings taught gender specific roles?
No, they were never taught. To some degree, it was the unspoken. It was just assumed, I guess.
Okay. Do you believe the way a person is raised has direct influence on their gender identity?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If it's ever stated, then that's an expectation. And typically, children will adhere to it. And if it's gone unstated, but is very apparent in every action or behavior in that family's culture, then still children tend to adhere. I think it dictates and governs a lot of how we interact in almost every capacity of life, really.
Okay. So then, do you believe the way you're raised has bearing on which gender you're most comfortable socializing with? Like, is there a gender that you prefer to be around more so than another?
Perhaps, yes, yes.
Okay.
For me, because my father was always a very strong and silent, fair, hospitable man, and my brother, my only brother as well, I and he also always he was never judgmental. I always remember thinking that he manages to find the happy medium or the neutral position in almost any scenario, and I admired it. My brother tended to exhibit those same traits, so I assumed that most males were less judgmental. So if anything, I gravitate to men for that very reason.
Okay. So, does a greater burden of child rearing and household maintenance lie with women, do you feel like? Or is that
Well,
equally equal now, would you say?
well, when you say burden, in what regard? Physical burden, emotional, psychological.
So, when I say a greater burden with child rearing, I mean, do, are women expected to raise the children more so than men? And as far as the cleanliness and household maintenance, does that fall with the women more? Or would you say it's equal now?
In my experience, in my childhood, definitely. Like I said, it was never stated, but it was always the unspoken expectation that my mother tended to the maintenance, or and I don't want to say the maintenance, the cleanliness, the tidying up and cleaning the house. That was my mother's job, and tending to the children's emotional and psychological needs. Whereas my father maintained the cars and maintained the working function of appliances and whatever else. The outdoors was always typically my father's responsibility, keeping our lawn manicured and the outside of the house. And the inside was my mother's. I will say that once upon a time in society, I presumed that it was the norm. People just almost assume those separate responsibilities without it ever being stated, but not so much anymore. And I think it's because, well, there's so many attributing factors as to why that's no longer the expectation of either a man or a woman, but it's just get it done if it needs to be done. And that's because the family unit has been disrupted so that it's not very feasible to have distinctive responsibilities when so often the case there isn't anyone there to uphold those responsibilities. So now it's just, if it needs to be done and you're the parent, then someone must do it. um, which is good, I suppose.
Okay. So, in your country, which is America, how do the roles of men and women differ in a family? How is the separation apparent?
Well, as I stated, it used to be very distinctive. Anymore, it's very skewed. Um, I don't think there are, and as a matter of fact, what I'm finding is that when I express certain expectations socially or publicly to my colleagues, sometimes they're immediately dispelled. Like, oh, well, Paige, you should know how to change the oil. You don't know how to change a tire. Or, why wouldn't you stop at the auto store and pick that up? And I'm thinking, what? So I'm starting to feel that like my thinking is antiquated. Like there's something wrong with me because I can clearly see the shift. It's very apparent. It's very apparent in our society that those gender specific roles in the family and in parenting and are starting to dissipate.
Okay. So, does the man still have the burden? Does the man still have the burden of providing for the safety, security, and financial well-being of the family, or does the woman, or is it kind of you work collectively to for the well-being of the household? What would you say in that manner?
Well, in this specific role of being the protector and the person to provide protection for the family, physical protection, I think it's still probably the male's burden. And I say that with such reluctance because there are so many females that are just alpha females that one might take that initiative to protect. Um, but I think it's innate in man simply because of the physiological build. They're typically bigger, they're typically stronger, they're typically a little bit more aggressive, physically aggressive. So we just assume that that is going to be what they will do is to protect. But there again, I see so many different relationships and cultures established within families that I wouldn't say it would be the norm necessarily, or it would be expected that it's a requirement.
If you have children, which you do, should boys and girls be treated differently?
In my opinion, indeed, their roles are different. But see, I'm then I don't know if solidifying is the word, but I'm confirming these gender based ideas if I say yes, but I do. I was raised that way, and I, having sons and daughters, definitely have a double standard to some degree with the expectations of my sons compared to my daughters.
Okay. So, do you think that society views women in a different light as far as crime goes and their different roles in society?
Yes, we do. But it's rapidly becoming just almost I don't know if I want to say an illusion or an assumption, uh, but they're again rapidly fading. Once upon a time, I think that myself as well as general society assumed that any of your heinous crimes, your horrific crimes, were going to be executed by a man always, and that is just not the case any longer. Women do some very graphic, very violent acts, and it's and now becoming quite common. So
I understand. Well, thank you for letting me interview you. This is going to conclude our gender roles interview. Thank you once again.